Evening. Today I will take a present the idea about the final test debating project part 1.
For almost a decade, scientists chased the source of a deadly new virus through China's tallest mountains and most isolated caverns. They finally found it here, in the bats of Shitao Cave. The virus in question was a coronavirus that caused an epidemic of severe acute respiratory syndrome, or SARS, in 2003. Coronaviruses are a group of viruses covered in little protein spikes that look like a crown, or corona in Latin. There are hundreds of known coronaviruses. 7 of them infect humans and can cause disease. The coronavirus SARS-CoV causes SARS, MERS-CoV causes MERS, and SARS-CoV-2 causes the disease COVID-19. Of the 7 human coronaviruses, 4 cause colds, mild, highly contagious infections of the nose and throat. 2 infect the lungs and cause much more severe illnesses. The 7th, which causes COVID-19, has features of each. It spreads easily, but can severely impact the lungs. When an infected person coughs, droplets containing the virus spray out. The virus can infect a new person when the droplets enter their nose or mouth. Coronaviruses transmit best in enclosed spaces where people are close together. Cold weather keeps their delicate casing from drying out, enabling the virus to survive for longer between hosts, while UV exposure from sunlight may damage it. These seasonal variations matter more for established viruses, but because no one is yet immune to a new virus, it has so many potential hosts that it doesn't need ideal conditions to spread. In the body, the protein spikes embed in the host cells and fuse with them, enabling the virus to hijack the host cell's machinery to replicate its own genes. Coronaviruses store their genes on RNA. All viruses are either RNA viruses or DNA viruses. RNA viruses tend to be smaller, with fewer genes, meaning they infect many hosts and replicate quickly in those hosts. In general, RNA viruses don't have a proofreading mechanism, whereas DNA viruses do. So when an RNA virus replicates, it's much more likely to have mistakes, called mutations. Many of these mutations are useless or even harmful, but some make the virus better suited for certain environments, like a new host species. Epidemics often occur when a virus jumps from animals to humans. This is true of the RNA viruses that cause the Ebola, Zika, and SARS epidemics, and the COVID-19 pandemic. Once in humans, the virus still mutates, usually not enough to create a new virus, but enough to create variations or strains of the original one. Coronaviruses have a few key differences from most RNA viruses. They're some of the largest, meaning they have the most genes. That creates more opportunity for harmful mutations. To counteract this risk, coronaviruses have a unique feature, an enzyme that checks for replication errors and corrects mistakes. This makes coronaviruses much more stable, with a slower mutation rate than other RNA viruses. While this may sound formidable, the slow mutation rate is actually a promising sign when it comes to disarming them. After an infection, our immune systems can recognize germs and destroy them more quickly if they infect us again, so they don't make us sick. But mutations can make a virus less recognizable to our immune systems and therefore more difficult to fight off. They can also make antiviral drugs and vaccines less effective because they're tailored very specifically to a virus. That's why we need a new flu vaccine every year. The influenza virus mutates so quickly that new strains pop up constantly. The slower mutation rate of coronaviruses means our immune systems, drugs, and vaccines might be able to recognize them for longer after infection, and therefore protect us better. Still, we don't know how long our bodies remain immune to different coronaviruses. There's never been an approved treatment or vaccine for a coronavirus. We haven't focused on treating the ones that cause colds, and though scientists began developing treatments for SARS and MERS, the epidemics ended before those treatments completed clinical trials. As we continue to encroach on other animals' habitats, some scientists say a new coronavirus jumping to humans is inevitable. But if we investigate these unknowns, it doesn't have to be devastating.
Q.
Syntax is a law of language that determines the word order and basic sentence structure within the different languages. Each language has a specific syntax that tells the speaker and the listener which parts of the sentence come first to help them make sense of what's being said. It's the guidelines we use when speaking and writing so that sentences are understandable and coherent. Be wary of confusing syntax or semantics with diction. These form the backbone of sentence construction, so let's break these definitions down. Syntax, as just mentioned, is the order of the words in a sentence. Diction is the specific word choice meant to express certain meanings. Semantics is the meaning conveyed by the particular words used. We'll be focusing on syntax in this video. In the English language, there's a word order that is set in stone for most types of sentences. Of course, there are always exceptions, but most of the time, standard English sentences will follow an SVO word order. Subject, verb, object. As in, the boy looks outside of the window. In this example sentence, we have the subject, boy, the verb, looks, and the object, outside. This image is an image of an English grammar syntax tree used by linguists to plot the structure of sentences. You may not often encounter a syntax tree, but knowing how to draw one is rather useful and will help you understand sentence structure. In the chart, you can see that the sentence is broken down into its parts: verbs, nouns, articles, and prepositions. After this step, the words are grouped together to determine which parts of the sentence are noun phrases, prepositional phrases, or verb phrases. Fun fact, SVO is not the only word order structure. Other languages vary word order and even include additional components in their syntax. In the example given with the syntax tree, the subject is cat, the verb is sat, and the object is Matt. The second picture is another way in which syntax can be written out. This diagram takes the sentence, "The dog loved the girl," and breaks it down into articles, nouns, verbs, noun phrases, and verb phrases, just like the previous example. In this sentence, the subject is dog, the verb is loved, and the object is girl. Again, the syntax trees are not to be intimidating, but are used to better understand the structure of a sentence and to reveal each part's purpose within the sentence. An additional use for syntax trees is that whenever a different word order is used for a sentence, it can be decoded. For example, if you are hearing a sentence in a foreign language that follows a VSO order or some other variation, creating a syntax tree for that sentence can help you to put the words in SVO order so that you might understand what's being said. Let's have a recap. 1. Syntax is the sentence structure. 2. Diction is the choosing of words to relate a certain meaning. 3. Semantics is the meaning that is expressed from the words used. 4. Syntax trees are a neat graphing tool to chart sentence structure and make sense of word order and how it's functioning in the world of English. Thanks for joining us for this syntax tutorial. If you found this video
Part 3.
What is a nation?
Bangsa.
The attempt to formally define the nation as a political concept dates back to 1882 when French philosopher and historian Ernest Renard published his seminal essay titled, What is a Nation? In this essay, Renard defines the nation as a large-scale solidarity constituted by the feeling of sacrifices that one made in the past and of those that one is separated to make in the future. This explains why Renard believes that if we are to imagine the nation as good and worthy of continuous sacrifice, we must realize that it necessarily entails a process of forgetting. This is because, for Renard, the efforts to obtain national unity, either in the name of civic or ethnic nationalism, involve acts of violence and subsequent forgetting. Based on the initial conception of a nation developed by Renard,
scholars have come up with a more formal definition of a nation, namely, a community of people formed on the basis of a combination of shared features such as language, history, ethnicity, culture, and territory. Put differently, a nation is the collective identity of a group of people understood as defined by language, history, ethnicity, culture, and territory. And for this reason, a nation is generally more overtly political than an ethnic group. In fact, many scholars considered it as a fully mobilized or institutionalized ethnic group. Later on, the famous political scientist, Benedict Anderson, views the nation as an imagined community. For Anderson, the nation is an imagined political community that is culturally imagined as both inherently limited and sovereign. As we can see, there are 4 key elements in this definition. First, the nation is imagined simply because members of any particular nation will never meet most of their fellow members, yet in the minds of each lives the image of their communion. Second, the nation is imagined as limited because it has finite, yet sometimes elastic, boundaries, beyond which other nations lie. Third, the nation is imagined as sovereign because the concept of the nation itself was born in an age when the Enlightenment and Revolution were destroying the legitimacy of the divinely ordained, hierarchical dynastic realm. Finally, the nation is imagined as a community because, regardless of the actual inequality and exploitation that may prevail within each, the nation is conceived as a deep, horizontal comradeship.